now time for House District 56B. Includes Representative John Huot and candidate Joe Scanlon. Welcome. We're going to start out with you, Representative Huot. The inability for Minnesota to conform to federal tax law causes complexity and cost to taxpayers in Minnesota. Why can't we get this issue resolved? Why doesn't Minnesota adopt federal tax law and federal changes as they occur rather than waiting months and even years to pass legislation that affects individual taxpayers?
So I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you to my opponent here who was willing to step up and put his name on the ballot. I agree with this. One of the most ludicrous things I saw when I went to the Minnesota House was, what are we doing? That was the question I had. I've been on subcommittees for taxes, but I was like, the feds have done it, let's move this forward and get it done. It's kind of funny, this is coming from an accountant though, but.
I raise it every year.
Yeah, and so I am in favor of that we should just conform automatically with the federal tax code. I don't see I know there's things within certain rules and laws that we got to go through, but those could easily be changed. And sometimes the dogma of politicizing this is just terrible because of our, we ended up being a political thing. It's not. It's once the feds do it, we should do it too. So I'm totally in favor of creating a bill that would do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Scanlon, if you win the election, you will become a lawmaker in St. Paul. What is your job as a legislator in Minnesota?
Well, thank you for having me on here, Scott. I really appreciate the Chamber of Commerce inviting us so that you all hear us speak. One of my first orders of business would be to make sure that I get together with all my colleagues and we decide and come up with ideas to help make the state safe. I think that's our number one priority, is to make this state safe. And one of those things that we can do to make the state safe is make sure that our police have the funding that they need to help protect us. Right now, things have just gotten a little crazy out there, and we just need to somehow rein all that crime and nastiness and just put a stop to it.
Thank you. Representative Huot, recently as taxpayers, we found out about a $250 million fraud scheme by Feeding Our Future. Also, a recent report from the nonpartisan Office of Legislative Auditor said that the Minnesota Department of Human Services poorly managed its own grant money during the pandemic. Who's minding the store? Who's responsible to watch out for our dollars?
Well, I am. Plain and simple. When we find out about frauds within departments, and again, once we get a report like this, and that's what the problem is that legislators don't hear this stuff till it's done. I'm going to give an example of the Emergency Medical Regulatory Board. I sit on that board. And when I went over there, started looking into it, I immediately went to the Speaker's office and said, this needs an audit today. We had an audit done. We found out that this was mismanaged for 20 years. That's what legislators have to do. There was another legislator assigned to this board that did nothing. Legislators can't be afraid, regardless what their party is, to stand up to it and take care of business. This $240 fraud, they need to go to jail. Plain and simple. They took money that was supposed to feed kids. I don't agree with it. And if the department is found at fault here, we're going to have to look at what we're going to have to make some changes over there too. So the audits are done. We sent the auditor over there. She's on her way. I'm the legislative auditor, not the state auditor. Legislative auditor is where our power comes from. We sent her over there. We'll find out where this leads, find out if there was earlier flags here. We know that there's a judicial mess going on here and things like that. So, but as far as I stand, I'm responsible for your money at the state. I'm responsible to make sure that people are held accountable. And that's what we're doing here.
Thank you. Joe Scanlon, Bloomberg recently posted that there's a 100% chance of a recession in 2023. 100% chance. With an expected recession for the upcoming year, what does the state of Minnesota need to do to protect ourselves from this?
One of the things we can do is one of the laws that I like to see get changed is the Social Security tax. That would help ease some of this recession that's about to hit us, according to Bloomberg. I think property taxes, we could give some relief on that as well. But it sounds like there's not much we can do about it right now. I think federally, one of the things that could really slow this down is if they were to open up and start producing more oil and natural gas. But that's on a federal level. There's not much we can do about that here. But just kind of trying to ease the pain of what we're going through here in Minnesota as far as, corporate taxes on businesses. Again, the Social Security tax, that if we eliminate that, that would free up a lot of money for the people that are now qualified, because eventually we're all going to be affected by this if we, when we get to retirement age and start drawing on that Social Security.
I think we got a little bit of time here, so I'm going to ask another question, and this is for both of you. Both answer this question is term limits, age limits. It's a big topic at the national level. It also affects local elections. Do you feel they're necessary, and at what age is the limit?
Do you want to go to me first?
Yes, why don't you go ahead and start, Representative Huot?
I don't want to answer that question. Joe and I are both, in our 40s here, and we just want to be able to help the state of Minnesota. So I can't believe this is even a question,
Can
Joe.
I call you a fibber? You may be in your 40s.
Yeah. I'm going with it, Joe. Just, anyways.
Leave it to the trained professionals.
Yeah. I think this has to be looked at. I think that's a real bad indicator, but I think there's a time that, even as a personal time, that you have to decide, you know what, we need fresh blood in here. So I think this should be looked at. I know I've talked to other state legislators and they've done it in their states, and so I think it's definitely something we can visit.
Joe?
This is one of the things that I'm running on when I'm talking to people door to door, and I absolutely would love to see term limits. It's something I've complained about my whole life. I just believe that we need to have fresh eyes coming and going all the time. I don't know what what the term limit should be. Should it be 6 terms, 5 terms, 7 terms? Because we do need to have plenty of people in there that are veteran politicians, because they're going to be able to help the newbies coming in like myself. But I do agree with John. We do need to look at that. And it's something, again, I'm pretty passionate about, that we should have term limits, and it's just a matter of getting together with both sides and coming up with a great idea or a great solution to that.
Thank you. Now we got our questions back and forth. Representative Huot asked Joe Scanlon a question.
Thank you. And Joe Scanlon, in some of your literature that I've been fortunate to receive in my mailbox, I saw in there that you feel that inflation can be taken care of in a portion. I don't think you could claim that it would take care of all of it by doing cuts to government. And I hope I'm not misquoting this, but if that is true, I think it's important that our constituents know that where you would see a priority to cut. Is it to seniors and nursing homes? Is it to our schools, our special ed programs? Is it to our police and fire? Those are the big pockets of spending in the state. And I'm going to put a caveat onto this, is that we can't use our normal dog whistle here and say fraud and spending or wasteful spending of government, because I want to know exactly where you saw that wasteful spending then and what it does. So that would be my question to you.
Well, I don't recall saying anything about wasteful spending. I'm trying to remember where I may have said that, if I even said it at all, or if I even took a survey.
It's in your lit.
It's in my literature?
Yeah.
Okay, I better
It's
look
okay,
at that.
I'm there with you, man.
Okay. The wasteful spending, if we look at, just for an example, and it's been beaten up pretty good here, you've got, I got a fly right there. The monies that have disappeared on us with the Feed the Future and the what happened up in St. Cloud for the daycare center was $100 million up there and $250 down here, that is the type of some waste that could be avoided. I know we need to have tax monies to run our governments. We just have to have it. But I just think a little bit better oversight would make the difference.
Thank you. Joe Scanlon, your question for Representative Huot.
One question. John, I'm pretty sure you probably are ready for this question. Well, I'm going to ask it to you. If good judgment is a trait we would like to see in our representatives, how does voting to defend the police show good judgment?
Did you say defend or defend?
Defund, excuse me.
Thought we were getting an easy question there. So there's no secret that this is the dog whistle of this campaign. I spent 30 years as an EMT working in public safety. This is extremely personal when hits come out against me on this subject. I have 2 brother-in-laws that are in law enforcement. I studied law enforcement until I decided to go into EMS, so I have a lot of friends that are cops. This is extremely personal. And I take offense to this when I see that I voted to defund. Number one, these bills that were coming up that under the other forum are what we call gotcha bills. The other side puts them on the floor just so we can have this discussion today. What I did do, because my signs are coming up, and I'm going to tell you, I voted for a $430 million bill, fought hard that that money would come to the suburbs. Come to the suburbs. And what happened? The other side packed it up and went home and said, we don't need Social Security. We don't worry about that tax on Social Security. We don't worry about this defunding. You know, go home and we'll deal with this in 2 years. We don't have time to deal with it. That's, and I'm emotional, I'm sorry. I dealt with it maybe a little bit inappropriate there, sorry.
Thank you. Now's the time to explain to us why we should be voting for you. Candidate Joe Scanlon.
Thank you, sir. I'm just an average individual. Joe Landrieu says pretty much the same thing I always say, is I'm just an average Joe. I work out of my house. I'm an independent insurance agent. And one day I just said, I just can't take this anymore. My wife and I had a long discussion, and I decided to take a shot at it. And here I am. I jumped in with both feet. And I can't tell you what an unbelievably great experience it has been so far. The funnest thing for me has been going door to door and getting to meet all the people in the city of Rosemount and parts of Apple Valley and parts of Egan. So what I'm going to take away from this is something I'll never be able to forget. But one of the bottom lines is a lot of things come down to judgment. A lot of things come down to decision making. And if I could use an athletic analogy, I would say coaching is everything at every level. If you look at coaching from the peewees all the way to the pros, it makes a big difference who is coaching and who's making the decisions. A lot can be said about politics. A lot can be said about businesses. You all have had a good boss and all have had a not very good boss, and you now know the difference. We are trying to get ourselves in a position to where we can show you what good management looks like, what good decision making looks like, and just overall do what we feel we can do, maybe a better job of coaching and making the right decisions for the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Representative John Huot.
Well, thank you, and thank you for everybody for taking your time to come and listen to our candidates today. My job's not done yet. I still have a lot of work to do. The work I've done speaks for itself. Never before has this district experienced the funding without taxation that we've got for our schools in 196 with the trifecta of Greg, myself, and Robert. We have pulled more money out of St. Paul back to our schools, and that's important for you because your home value is based on those schools. We do well in this district because of our great schools and our great teachers. And it really insults me when I hear that we're doing this or we're doing that. Go in a classroom. Go in a classroom and see if you think that's what they're doing, because they're not. We have the best school district in the state, and I went around and looked at those schools. I know that And I feel that's an accomplishment. The Minnesota Zoo, again, the trifecta. The Minnesota Zoo is much better today than it was 4 years ago because we put work into that. We were able to get the state to make much needed investments. And soon you'll be able to go above the treetops and walk around the zoo. And that's what's going to attract the World Fair here, to go to our economy. Our economy is based in Apple Valley, Rosemount, is based on the schools and the zoo. We still have some things to do. Our employers are saying they don't have employees. They don't. They don't have workforce housing. We don't have a good, robust transportation system out here. We have to work on that because not everybody can afford a car. I can't believe we don't have a BRT running down Cedar Avenue yet, all the way out to Hastings to Burnsville. We need to work on this hard because this is where we're going, because you need employees and we need to help you. That's what the state steps in for. Thank you.
Thank you. These are your candidates for House District 56B. Let's give them a big round of applause.